Let me move you to the issue of education.
Education.
Education. As you know, there's a lot of attention on reforming what used to be called No Child Left Behind, is now called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. What's the President's strategy to be sure that kids with disabilities will continue to be included in accountability provisions in education reform?
Well, first of all, President Obama believes that education is an economic imperative that should be within reach of every single child in America. He believes that students with disabilities have the right to an equal education that provides them with an opportunity to acquire the same knowledge and the same skills as their peers, okay? This has been, we know, a difficult task, especially with the increasing number of students with disabilities in public school classrooms across the country. However, if you, and because under IDEA, as many of us know, the federal government initially agreed to provide 40% of all funding to local districts, 40% of the cost of educating a special education student. But they've never appropriated more than 20%. They promised 40. When the law was passed, they've never appropriated more than 20%. Well, I am happy to say that in President Obama's 2012 budget, he included an additional $200 million in increase to state IDEA grants. Okay, that's not going to solve the problem, but it's something. And in contrast, the Romney-Ryan proposed budget would slash federal spending to IDEA by an additional 20%. That's the fact. Those are the facts. Those are their proposals, okay? At a time where we need to be making more investments in this area. So I think that, and we could go on and talk about college, and increasingly, students with disabilities, thankfully, are going on to college. Not in the same kind of numbers that all of us here in this room would like, but it is happening. And people with disabilities need good role models. People who are lawyers and doctors and other professionals to show them, because the expectations have been very low for people with disabilities. In part because I've always said that it's not so much a person's physical or mental condition that creates the disability. It's the attitude that is held by our society, that frequently and too often we've had to deal with the problem of low expectation in schools across this country. People with disabilities can do amazing things, and we can do anything if only given the opportunity. And that's why we want to have more opportunities for education.
Well, let me ask you about that opportunity, because it takes us into some of the things that Governor Romney has said and stands for. And since he's not here, or his surrogate's not here, I'll be talking to her in a little while. I'll try to fill a little bit of that role, at least in the conceptual frame of it all. So, opportunity. And at the Alliance for Full Participation that I was a part of not too long ago, we had a lot of companies there, businesses, corporations that were providing these jobs and these opportunities for people in the disabilities community. And what Governor Romney might say is, now wait a minute, this is fine to talk all about government role for a minute, but we cannot lose connection with the very important role that the private sector will play. That's where the jobs will and should come from. What will Barack Obama do? What should the Obama administration, if there is one in the next term, do to improve connections with the corporate community to get those jobs and those opportunities flowing?
Well, I've already gone over two huge things that President Obama has already done to expand job opportunities for people with disabilities. 100,000 new people in the federal workforce.
That's the federal workforce.
And Section 503. I agree. But I just said a few minutes ago, Frank, if you recall, that I don't think that it's just the government's job alone. I do agree. And I don't think, quite honestly, that there's a big disagreement among the political parties on this point, because I've worked with plenty of people on both sides of the aisle who understand the issue of unemployment for people with disabilities. Unfortunately, that number has not moved significantly, very disappointingly so, since we passed the Americans with Disabilities Act many years ago. There are too many people who are able and willing to work who can't find a job. And I agree that corporations, the government needs to work together with corporations. People with disabilities need more job training skills, okay? And those are the types of programs that companies are not necessarily going to fund, that the government needs to fund to make sure that people are job ready. But when I was in Massachusetts, working at the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, I coordinated a program called the Massachusetts Corporate Partnership Program. And what we did is we identified all the different companies in Massachusetts who had hired people with disabilities, all different types of people with disabilities, and we paired them up with other companies who were considering hiring people with disabilities. And because I can talk about jobs till I'm blue in the face, but guess what, Frank? The people who make those hiring decisions are the supervisors, okay? And we all in this room know that we need to get to the supervisors, okay? And the CEOs of these companies who make an affirmative, say, listen, we need to make our workforce a lot more inclusive. And so I agree with you. And, we're sitting here in the audience with a good friend of mine, Joyce Bender, who's probably one of the leaders in expanding job opportunities in the United States of America. She was the former head of the Epilepsy Foundation. She now serves with me as the board chair of the American Association with People with Disabilities, and there's no one who knows how to expand job opportunities better than Joyce Bender. She's sitting right over there. And, but I agree with you, Frank, that together, working with corporate, and I've learned from Joyce, that there are businesses out there.
We talked a moment ago, we mentioned that the tax credits that could be offered to businesses and other things. Are there other things, proactive steps that a re-elected Barack Obama would take that would provide some propulsion fuel under this effort? Because as you say, in the years since the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, through economic ups and downs, we haven't moved very much.
Well, our economy hasn't, I mean,
last 10 years have been brutal.
Last 10 years have been brutal, and unfortunately, a lot of people with disabilities are the last to be hired, okay? And we know, all you have to do is see the statistics of people of color, women, other types of groups that have kind of traveled this road kind of before us, and we know that the economy, it's been tough out there, Frank. But people with disabilities, do not want a job. They want every single person with a disability that I know wants to go to work every single morning and wants to have a paycheck and wants to be a contributing member of society. And you know what? And there are people around this country who've done a great job in the corporate community and have been recognized for that, and we need more of people like that.
What I want to ask you now is about priorities.
Okay.
Whoever the next president is, when they're sworn in, they will face a profound set of challenges, many of them driven by the budget situation and intense pressures to cut additional spending. We know how much of discretionary spending affects communities of need, a great deal of it. We know that more than half the budget is not even something that there is any discretion over. It's locked into entitlement programs and such things as that. Knowing what you know about the disability community, knowing what you know about Barack Obama's position, what would his priorities be with respect to the disability community in a second term, given those pressures?
Well, I think we've had a chance to talk about...
But you've got all of them out there. I'm asking you if you had to take the top 2 or 3, so the people in this room,
well,
I think
immediately following the election, I think it would be expanding international disability rights by making sure that the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities is finally ratified by the United States Senate. I think that would be the most immediate thing, because what people in this room realize is that we're part of a worldwide struggle. We're part of a worldwide movement. We feel a connection with our disabled brothers and sisters around the world, okay? And we have a situation now where we have a law. It's pending. It's passed out of the Foreign Relations Committee, 13-5. It's bipartisan. And we have people, senators like John McCain, who have come out and for it. But guess what? The Republican Party platform on page 45 asks that its members do not support CRPD, do not support expansion of civil rights for people with disabilities around the world, despite the fact that we have 20 national veterans organizations, including the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Wounded Warrior Project, have all endorsed this bill. It's a shame. A vote for Mitt Romney is a vote against international disability rights and against the creation of a more accessible and non-discriminatory planet. That is right in the lame duck. We have the opportunity to do that, okay? After that, what are we going to do? I think we've just talked about some of these other initiatives. Section 503, expanding these opportunities, okay, for people. I think you're right. We have a 2,000-page health care bill, which you yourself is just, it's what we call enabling legislation, meaning that it's the raw skeleton, okay? There are so many, the secretary shall find a pathway for generic biologics. The secretary shall do this, shall do that. And we know that that's where the rubber meets the road, okay? And part of the way President Obama makes sure that people with our views are represented is by appointing smart people with disabilities in his administration, and this president has an outstanding track record of attracting and promoting people with disabilities for senior positions in his administration.
Before I ask you if you were the debate moderator question, which will give you a chance to provide both your imagination and your wit to your response. You've talked a lot, and I think this is something that all candidates would sign on to. But I'd be very interested, and I think this audience would be very interested in your response to this. You've talked a lot about the need to change attitudes. Yeah. You've been working at this all your life. What works? What should we be doing? What should all of us be doing? What should the candidates all pledge to do better or differently?
Well, I think that something every single person can do is not ignore somebody with a disability when you come in, when you meet somebody with a disability. It sounds very simple.
You think that happens?
I think that happens every day. I think people will cross the street before they fear about having to encounter or have a conversation with somebody with a disability. Listen, all of us have prejudices, okay? And I have prejudices too. All of us do, okay? And I think a lot of what we're talking about here is the fear and misunderstanding, because once companies hire somebody with a disability, okay, you know what? They hire another person with a disability because a lot of their fears are allayed. Once people come in contact, we've had an educational system, for example, where it's possible to go through your entire educational system and never have contact with somebody with a disability. Now, we know what happens when people are educated and never having met a person of color before. What happens? Do you think those people are more prejudiced or less prejudiced? You know the answer. The same is true because we have been isolated from our peers in the educational system. We have separate buses that transport us around the cities frequently, not everywhere, thankfully, but in many places around the country. And so I think it is that it's going to take a long time to change attitudes. But we're getting there, Frank. We're getting there. And the thing about the Americans with Disabilities Act is when it removed a lot of architectural barriers, okay? Ones you've seen removed at hotels like this, okay? Would enable people with disabilities to use the bathroom. We had to fight 25 years to use the bathroom, okay? Just keep that in mind. But more people are becoming more vibrant in their community, right? And because of the Air Carrier Access Act, people can travel on airplanes more easily. So that begins to reduce a lot of the fear and stereotypes, in my opinion. You know, we've got a long way to go, Frank, but I think we're well on our way. largely because of the work of the people and the organizations that are in this room today. This is the leadership of the disability community in the United States of America.
Well, let me say as I move on to my last question that the premise of it, there's absolutely no way this would happen. There's no way you would be the moderator of the presidential debate. You might participate in the presidential debate, but there is no way that you would be the moderator of it. Do not take that as an endorsement. That's merely an observation. But if you were the moderator of this very important debate, there are many people who say that given the closeness of the race, despite some of the movement that's taking place out there, it may well be decided, and certainly heavily influenced by these presidential debates. Yes. But if you were the moderator, and if you were to ask a question of these candidates about or on behalf of the disabilities community, what would it be? What would you most want to see these two candidates engage on?
Well, I would like to see, not just in the presidential debates, but I would like to see candidates for public office at all levels of the government be asked, what are you going to do to expand jobs and other independent living and other opportunities for people with disabilities? I don't think, Frank.
So jobs. Jobs is
jobs. I would like to know. Because I would like to know what both of these candidates, have them put on their disability hat. Have them really try to, it would be very revealing, Frank, to have an open-ended question about disability, because it would tell us what is there. Do they have a civil rights orientation? Do they have an orientation that's based on pity and fear? Do they have an orientation like we've got to take care of those people? Do we have, I mean, what is their orientation? And so I think, I would ask, I mean, I could sit here and rattle off 10 questions and try to be, you know, make myself sound intelligent and all that. But the point is that I think at all levels of government, Frank, we need more people with disabilities running for office ourselves. I think, and I think that at all levels of government, state government and federal government, people need to know, just like they have to answer questions regarding the environment and housing and education, people should have to respond to questions like this. And I hope one of the moderators does ask some questions about disability law and policy. But before I leave the stage, Frank, I just want to say thank you to you for helping make this forum so important and so revealing. So unless you have some more questions.
Some more last questions? No, there's only one last question. No, but
in all seriousness, if I could just say one last thing, I think that we are here because for years and years, people with disabilities, we talked a lot, but we didn't go out and register to vote. Okay, voting is the political currency. Okay, we don't have a lot of money in the disability community. Okay, what we have is our voice and our vote. Okay, so I encourage everybody in this room, study the issues. Obviously, I would like to ask you to vote for President Barack Obama for president, but you become the judge and you become informed about the issues, and you go and tell your friends and neighbors that these issues are important to me. And that is the message that Barack Obama would say, we're all in this together.
Well, Ted Kennedy, Jr., thank you very much for being here, for
Thank
traveling to Ohio.
Thank you all.
For traveling to Ohio and for representing President Obama as his surrogate here. I really hope that next time we can have Barack Obama, or he wouldn't be running for re-election unless they change the Constitution, but the presidential candidates themselves. But Mr. Kennedy, thanks again for coming to Ohio for this conversation. What's important about this conversation, and we'll have an opportunity to hear from Mitt Romney's surrogate in a few minutes, is that the impact of these policies that we're discussing will be felt for years to come across generations, and certainly over the passage of time, I think everybody hopes will contribute to the changing of attitudes and the improvement of prospects in employment, in housing, in health care, and in opportunity.